Hello, fellow songwriters, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of the How Songs Are Made podcast, where we talk to notable artists about their songwriting process. I'm your host, Trey Xavier, and today I'll be talking to David Ellefson of DIETH about how they write songs. Today's episode is brought to you by my songwriting course, which is called Complete Rock and Metal Songwriting. It's 15 hours of everything I know about writing songs, everything from writing riffs and transitions to melodies, harmonies, drum parts, vocals, lyrics, and more. And you can find out more about that at the link in the description or at howsongsaremade.com. This episode and all past episodes of the podcast can be heard as audio podcasts everywhere that podcasts are hosted, or you can find them at howsongsaremade.podcast.com. And now, the new album, To Hell and Back, is out now on Napalm Records. Please welcome my esteemed guest, David Ellefson of DIETH. Oh, where did the Zoom go? Dang it, you're not on screen. Hold on a second. That was a little anticlimactic. Suddenly, they can hear you, but they can't see you. Let me fix that. Anyway, how are you doing? While I fix this, let's keep talking.
Yeah. Hey, Trey, how are you?
I'm great. So you are in Frankfurt, Germany, one of my favorite countries.
Yes. We kicked off the tour actually in Berlin with Testament and Voivod. And then we did some shows across Poland. We made our way back over to Hanover, the Grass Pop Festival in Belgium last week. We did a little acoustic show up in Amsterdam. So we've played festivals, direct support, headline, and acoustic, all in like the first couple weeks of the band's life. So
wow,
we figured let's just intentionally throw us to the wolves and see if we can hold up. And so far, so good. It's been a good thing. So. And it's interesting since we're on a podcast talking about songwriting, when playing acoustic, I think was, that's a strip it down, let's really see what you got kind of moment. Right. And I'm glad the guys were up for it. Paulo from Sepultura is part of an owner of that bar, the BR020 up in Amsterdam. And some years ago, Frank Bello and I from Anthrax, we were over here with our band Altitudes and Attitude, and we were doing some shows with Slash, and we did a similar thing the night that we played with him, and then the next day they opened the bar up for us on a Monday night, and we went in and we played acoustic. So I'd done it once before, and I knew it was fun, but I think with me and Frank's songs, they were kind of intentionally more of kind of singer-songwriter songs, but to bring DIETH in, and which is heavy and has a lot of bombast and a lot of energy coming at you, to break it down acoustic, showed a whole other side of the songs. First we played the songs, we played the album, right? So, got to hear it, and then we went up and we played it acoustic so you could kind of do the A-B comparison. And I think even we were pleasantly surprised with how the songs, they broke down nice. And, when you play electric, you're pushing out a lot of volume at people. So you're kind of blowing them back, right? That's sort of the intention of it, right? But when you play acoustic, you're dropping all that wall of sound, and you're actually letting people come in and get closer to you, and sort of come into your realm and sort of fold into, sort of the quality of the music. So it requires a very different approach, to do both of those things.
Yeah, you're drawing people in rather than blasting them back, and they're having a crawl.
letting them in, yeah.
Yeah, letting them in.
The day before, we played Grass Pop, so it's just bang, just assault, and as I stood front of house, especially on those big main decks, I'm like, they wire PA systems in mono, right? So they're, so they had, 2 stages, so there's basically 4 big line arrays, and even front of house, it's like, man, I mean, it's an awesome stereo, millions of watts, but man, it is intentionally designed to just really spank your eardrums and kick you in the chest and blow you back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, to go the next day and literally sit in a corner bar about the size of my sofa here, and all 4 of us fit on a stage with some, Taylor provided some guitars for us. And it's tricky because, DIETH, we tuned to C, right? We tuned down to C. And it's interesting. I think I had an Ibanez bass that the Alejandro, the bar owner, one of the owners there had, and it had some nice rubber strings on it, which was perfect, really.
Mhm.
Wasn't clangy, but normally with DIETH when we record, I take a 5-string bass like this, which is normally in B, and I tune the whole bass up a half step because, when instruments tune down, guitars are okay with it. Les Pauls generally hate it. Stratocasters, depending, they might fight you. Basses just hate being tuned down. At least that's what I found, and I know a lot of the modern metal guys, they'll essentially take the bottom 4 strings of a 5-string and that will be their, B becomes the new E, if you will, right? But with DIETH, I tuned everything up a half step, so the bass is really tight, the strings are really twanging, and I don't know. I just found it recorded a lot better than trying to drop it. When you drop things, get floppy, amplifiers get mad, speakers are super unhappy, and just the whole thing gets kind of, pretty buggy down in the lower regions of the audio spectrum.
Yeah, well, it's either that or you get something with a really long scale length, and then it starts to, the frets start to get huge.
Yeah. And guitar players, they have these drop pedals, right, which really sound pretty good, and I think Kempers do too, right? On some of these modern devices,
Most
you
of them
can
have
just
something.
drop. Yeah, but they're fairly accurate. Nothing's as accurate as just dropping for real. You know what I mean? But there's some buggy little things to work around. I think maybe C# is guitars might be a little happier there. C, you're kind of really pushing the threshold of where they like to be. So, a few little sonic things to work out, and you have to really kind of just stroke the string. You're not digging in and yanking and hitting that thing very hard. You're just kind of really, kind of like a feather on the string, to be honest with you, which is a bit of a challenge because when you play really heavy music and you're thrashing and moshing, your tendency is to want to hit the guitar pretty hard, and if you do, you're just going to naturally, every time you hit it, you're going to have intonation problems and be out of tune.
And on the album, it sounds like you're smacking the crap out of it. The bass tone is enormous on the album. It's
pretty big.
I know
it's pretty big, yeah.
From my adventures in recording bass that it always to get that sound, you gotta hit it good and hard.
Yeah,
Usually.
And that's what I liked about tuning it up. Is you can hit it, and it's more like a banjo, right? It's and then it whole. I know you can't probably hear it, but I'm not plugged into an amp here. But it's you can hit it pretty hard, and it's twanging. It's twanging pretty good, and I just use the standard 5-string. Kind of, I don't know what this is, I think it's a 125 and a 105. Kind of a standard gauge set like that. But yeah, you tune it up, and all of a sudden everything's like twanging pretty good, and it retains the pitch really well.
Yeah. So beyond just the crushing bass tones and overall just very killer production of the album, let's talk a bit about the writing, because that's obviously what we do here. So actually, there's, aside from the intro questions, there's really only one big question that we ask here on the podcast, and all the other questions are basically just follow-ups, and that is that what is the songwriting process like for the band? And normally I ask, well, how was it different from previous? But because this is a brand new band, right? First album.
Yeah.
So you could contrast it with how you've written in the past. But basically, how did that go this time?
Well, as they say, you have your whole life to write your first album and about 9 months to write the second one, right? So, you've got all the time in the world to come up with that first batch of songs. And in this case, I got the call in January 2022, so about a year and a half ago. And we really, from January to December of last year of 2022, we not only wrote and recorded the record, we shot 3 music videos. And really, got signed to Napalm and put the whole thing to rest. I mean, the whole record, we really got the whole thing done and in the can and ready to go. And then this year was the setup and the release. So, I I think what was cool about this, so I got the email in early January 2022, with an introduction to Guilherme, our guitar player and singer, and I knew of Entombed and I knew of Decapitated, but I did not know Guilherme, and I had not met Mihal before. So we were introduced on email. I said, sure, send me a song. Let me hear what you got. So they sent over the song that became In the Hall of the Hanging Serpents. And it was kind of a demo drum take, the guitars. It was kind of a rough pass, but the tune was there, right? So I put bass down to it. And I don't always like recording bass first. I used to do that, back in the olden days, in the 80s and early 90s. And I learned making records over the years. From a tone point of view, I like to put bass down a little bit later, sometimes after guitars are down. And from a compositional point of view, I like to put bass down even after there's a vocal melody down, because sometimes you can play around. That's kind of a pop sort of approach, because the bass can sometimes play around the melody of the vocal a little bit. So in this particular case, Guilherme had the song written. I played the bass on it, finished the drums, mixed it, and realized we had something. It's like, oh, this is a new sound. This is pretty cool. We're having fun. I flew over here to Europe. We went to Poland, shot the music video, got in the room together, and we realized, okay, we look good. We get along. Break bread, just kind of hang out as three dudes and see if what it's like to hang and be in the room. So for me, I think from a band point of view, that's always important. And especially in this case where you've got a guy from Brazil, a guy from Poland, and me from America, three continents coming together. There was sort of this moment of just get in the room and I didn't mind making the trip over here to make that happen. So once we did that, then we start working on some more songs. I think Wicked Disdain and Dead Inside were the next two songs that Guilherme sent over. Pretty completed. And, then I hit Guilherme. I said, so I guess there's this moment where I'm like, okay, either I'm playing bass to his songs, and I guess maybe that's one level of commitment of my life, or are we going to co-compose things? Are we going to write together? Are we going to, try to be collaborative? That's kind of a whole other level of, how far in you want to go on stuff, at least for me. So I sent over a folder of riffs that I had, because he was totally up for it. And he really liked what I had, it's a bunch of stuff that I'd recorded, and just, kind of, usually when I write, I'll write on guitar. Honestly, I usually don't write on bass. At home I have a PDT 40 bass, and I have a little Marshall mini stack, and I'll plug it into it, and I'll sit and I'll grind a bunch of riffs. But I play very differently on that. I don't play heavy metal. I play, I don't know, just rock, alternative rock, anything. It's not a heavy metal thing at all. So usually when I write, I start with guitar. So even with DIETH, I sent over a folder of riffs. Guilherme started digging into it, was liking it. I default to him sort of as the musical basis of the group, not bassist, but basis, right? Of sort of the bass line of sort of, what's legal, right? What fits within the window of what we're doing here, So, because I think ultimately at some point everything ends up going through his hands, through his ears, and because he initially was the only singer in the band until we got in the studio and discovered my voice, actually had a nice fit in the band. That was kind of the framework of it all, right? So, I sent to him that I sent over some lyrics. I sent over the lyrics for Don't Get Mad, Get Even. I sent over the lyrics for Heavy as the Crown. He really liked those. And so I guess probably my first sort of kind of complete composition that I sent over is the song Heavy as the Crown. And I initially was starting that on piano at my house. I think it was in E, and I couldn't get it going, So I next to the piano I have a guitar at ESP. It's kind of like the cheap version of the Alex Skolnick signature model, right? It's but I love it. It's, you know, I buy guitars. I think I paid $279 for this guitar at a local guitar shop, and it just has songs in it, you know. So to me, I'm not a guitar collector. I have a gazillion guitars and basses, but to me, they have songs in them. And when I get one of my songs are out of them, I happily hand them off or sell them off to someone else so they can get their songs out of them. You know, and I've got one song, not expensive guitars at all. So to me, you know, that's just kind of I'm at with that. So this particular guitar, I pick it up, I drop tune it, you know, like I said, DIETH is in C. I dropped down because I think the guitar was tuned to E flat, so I did the drop D tuning. So that would be in I guess a C sharp, you know, D flat tuning. And I just, you know, I started kind of chugging the riff, right? This sort of metal scuffle thing, right? And I was kind of chugging away on it. And I kind of wrote the whole thing at once, because when I write, even if it's just my little folder of guitar riffs I send over, I usually write what seems to be probably a verse. And then I always try to tag a chorus with it. Because in my mind, I don't like just Tetris a bunch of riffs together. I don't write well like that. I kind of write in a song structure where I at least like to get a verse, a chorus, maybe a verse and chorus, and sort of get the basis of a song together, right? So on this one, then I just kind of started singing. You know, this very kind of Ozzy-esque. I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but it's just kind of Children of the Grave, you know? Right? It was just kind of sort of scatting this harmony, right? And what I liked about it is the music was really low. The vocal was really high. Again, it kind of had this early 70s Sabbath Ozzy-esque kind of thing to it, you know? And so I just, honestly, everything in my life, this is my digital audio workstation right here, my iPhone, right? I set it up, I film it, I send it over to Poland and over to Guilherme's in Portugal now. So we transferred, I sent it over, I said, hey guys, had a couple of ideas. And they came back, oh my gosh, this is great, I love this. And quite honestly, that was the first song that they both said, okay, you're definitely singing on this album, because first time they'd heard my voice, and Guilherme's got this, you know, dark, deep, guttural, you know, kind of death metal voice, and I've got this really clean, you know, singing voice. You know, I'm really not a rock singer. I'm like this kind of clean sound, you know. So going into the record, as we got together then later in September here south of Frankfurt here at the Kohler Keller Studios for a few weeks, you know, that was where I knew I was coming into the session. I knew for sure I'd be singing Heavy as the Crown. And I didn't think I'd be singing on our ballad on Walk With Me Forever. That's probably another story here in a minute. But I knew coming into this that I'd have that song. And I think the second part of a song, so, you know, got the music, sort of, you know, have a sketch of a vocal melody. So I feel like I've got a song working. There's something started here, right? There's something to grasp onto. Then it's about, you know, Guilherme liked the Heavy as the Crown lyric, and he said, man, let's put those two together. I think that really works here. And the way that I had my structure, even when I write lyrics, you know, I'll write 3 or 4 lines at a time, right? Kind of in a stanza. I try not to get too rhymey, because oftentimes the rhymey thing just sounds just like kindergarten, you know? It doesn't sound like it's, you know,
kind of nursery rhymey.
So I try. Yeah, so sometimes if I'll just get a couple lines, I'll kind of get a story. And then I think the next benchmark for me is, okay, what's the song about? In like 1 or 2 sentences, what's the song about? So, you know, for me, it was, you know, it's the phrase, you know, to whom much is given, much is expected. You know, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? So I was thinking about political leaders. I was thinking about a former president in particular. I was thinking about abuse of power. I was thinking about situations that I've been in where there's been an abuse of power, or maybe, you know, just watching unfair treatment of things. And, you know, so I kind of started to put the storyline together. Right. And then for me, that was that. And so you know, because I think there always needs to be sort of a protagonist, if you will, right? Sort of a lead character in the storyline, right? And in this case, it's not really a true story. It's not like a personal journey for me. You know, it's okay to write about things that are not real. You know, it's okay to make up a story. It's okay to take maybe a couple of people or factual things and sort of then create a story. You know, it's okay to do that. You know, Harry Potter's not a real event. You know what I mean? But it's an awesome movie. It's a great book, right?
One of my favorite
I think,
lyric writing teachers said this recently. Our job is to write the truth, not the facts. Like, if we're making a piece of art, we're writing the truth.
Sure.
The facts are malleable. It doesn't have to be an exact story that actually happened.
Yeah, and the story can ebb and flow, and you know, exactly. So it's, you know, in this particular case, that was, you know, kind of how. And here's the thing: I think when you write a story, to your quote there, the truth, we always see a little bit of ourselves in it. You know what I mean? It's the old saying that, you know, if you write about somebody else, you know, there's sort of, you know, what's your POV? What's your point of view? You writing about someone else, and you can't, you know, it's pointing out there's three people. Be careful somebody else, because you're always going to see a little bit of yourself in that story as well. Or are you writing a song about you, you know, kind of from your perspective, right? Sometimes it's fly on the wall, you know. I go to Boys of Summer from Don Henley. I actually used that video concept as I drafted the treatment for the Walk With Me Forever video, right? I drafted about a man and a woman. They're the protagonists in this story. And I'm like Don Henley. I'm sort of this narrator on the side, right? And you know, I love how in that video Don's like on this dolly, or they've got, you know, the Flintstones background moving behind him, right? And like a movie set. And he's just narrating the story, and then you see this guy and girl down on the beach, and they're in love, and you know, and you really feel, oh man, summer's over. What a great summer, and summer love, or whatever it was, right? So I that's the storyline I adapted for the video, to tell that story. So I'm in the video, but it's not about me, and I'm just a narrator in the background, essentially, you know. So which is kind of a whole other concept of storytelling, is telling the story through the lens of a video, because so many times, you know, we've written a song, and then a video company comes in and they go, we think it should be about this and that. It's like, that doesn't have anything to do with what we were thinking when we wrote the song. And sometimes the video needs to be very literal to the lyric, right? It should be very literal. Other times, you know, video directors come in and see something very different. You know, To Hell and Back, our video director, we shot that video in Katowice, Poland, and the video director, he took the three of us in sort of our lives, and then there's this demon, you know, it's sort of like this, you know, the good and the bad, the devil and the angel, and there's always this demon looming in the background, right? I guess it's kind of that saying, resist the devil and he will flee from you, but if you let the devil in, now he gets a foothold in your life, right? So it was, and he used it, each one of us a very different part of our lives. So, you know, which I thought was kind of a cool, kind of a literal interpretation of the song, you know, and wrestling with this demon, wrestling with the devil to sort of get to the other, you know, to hell and back, right? So, you know, I like video. I've come to appreciate video, especially the ones we've done with DIETH, because they've been they're very much another sort of visual component of the songwriting. You know, you're sort of visually telling people outwardly, through, you know, the video channels, Like this is what we mean, you know. And if that's not what you mean, you better speak up now, because that's what they're going to shoot, and that's what's going to be out there forever.
I've always thought of a music video, because I love music videos. I've always thought of music videos as like sort of scoring the song. It's like the reverse of scoring a scene in a movie or a TV show, right? Where you start with the visual and then you add the music. It's like the reverse of that. You're taking the music and creating a little world around it. And so that's always ultra fun. And it's really nice when it turns out how you want it to, and when it doesn't, it's a little, there's that sort of cognitive dissonance between the two elements.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, because it's kind of like when you read a book and then you go see the movie, you go, oh man, the book was way better than the movie. And and why is that? Well, because in a book, it's left open to the interpretation of the reader, right? You and I could read the same book and have two very different experiences. And yet when we go to the movie, we're both watching now this director, this screenplay, all the people involved in it. They've sort of summarized, you know, through a handful of scenes that they can fit in, say, a 90-minute film. They've summarized and now given us, this is what they think the book was about, right? So with songs, it's interesting because, especially with lyric writing, because, you know, the lyric can mean different things to each listener. And that's why I try not to, even when people go, hey, what's this song about? It's like, I don't know, what do you think it's about? You know what I mean? Because it's you bought the record, it's your experience, you know. Our job was just sort of to deliver it. We're like Amazon. We deliver it to your door, and then you take it inside, and it's you do whatever you want with it from there.
Yeah.
I always say, you know, when artists make an album, we first make it for us, but when we put it out, it's now for you, you know. And that's, I think, where, you know, once you put that thing out, you've let go of the control of what it is, and you know, you know, people have all kinds of different interpretations of the songs, and I think that's the beauty of what music does, is it hits people in different ways.
Yeah, you write something with a certain intention, and you're always going in, you've got an idea of what it's about, and you can put that into the music. Like you can, give it all of what it's meant to be and create it to be what it's meant to be. But then you put it out into the world, and you can't control how other people are going to receive it, how they're going to hear it and understand what you've said. The same way that they'll interpret any quote that you say, or an interview that you're giving, like right now, you know, they'll hear what you're saying. And,
like right now,
and hear a
what
certain
the hell
thing.
are those guys talking about?
What are they talking about?
Yeah.
But that's a very important thing to consider when you're creating anything, and songwriting especially. But people are always going to take what you've put out there and view it through their own lens, in the same way that you were talking about, like writing from your perspective. It's always going to be from your perspective. Even if you're writing the song as if it's from somebody else's perspective, it's always the interpretation of how you think it's going through. So really, it's always about what you're...
I'll give you a good example of that. And I have the lyric right here behind my screen of you, so I'm going to look it up here. So it's funny. So take Walk With Me Forever, right? The ballad that I ended up singing. And the reason I ended up singing it is Guillermo brought the tune in. He had some ideas. He originally wrote it about his friend Lars from Entombed, LG, as he refers to him. He had got cancer. He passed. He didn't really have this sort of closure with it, right? So it's this song about, you know, about grief, about sort of not having closure of someone passing, right? So I step up to the mic. You know, Guillermo had kind of a phrasing, at least in mind, and I stepped up and said, "Do you mind if I take a stab at some fleshing out some melody ideas?" Right? So using his phrasing, you know, I just kind of, you know, developed all the way on my path. I feel that I can't leave this hole, right? And, you know, when you sing, you're always holding vowels, right? The consonants are just a sort of stop and start a vowel, right? On the way on. So it's A-E-I-O-U, right? M-A-E-I-O-U. Right? So we're always holding these vowels. And, I find when singing, as I've, taken some instruction here even recently on that, it's one of the things my vocal instructor said. He goes, if you're struggling with a pitch, he goes, always refer to what vowel is it you're trying to sing, and let that vowel out, because chances are you're either closing it off, or you're splatting it or something, right? So there's these kind of things about the mechanics of singing that apply. But, so I sort of had the right temperament, and the band tuning to C is perfect, man. Cause I literally, my voice literally sits in about the key of like an old 70s country and Western crooner, like C, G, D, like all the happy keys, right? The keys they play in church and, country and Western tunes, right? That's kind of where my voice, E is not comfortable for my voice. It's just always been uncomfortable. E, F sharp, these kind of rock and metal keys, man. It's those. In fact, as a kid, I was an alto. When I hit puberty, I became a tenor. And now in my my older age, I'm certainly a baritone with slight tenor tendencies, right? So within my range, F sharp's that's kind of the top of my range. So the standard A, A440, A, E, F sharp, those keys were never comfortable for me to sing. And I could sing, so I always call it the Michael Anthony, higher third. I could always sing that pretty well. Probably Peace Sells, but Who's Buying is a perfect example. When we were in the room writing it, Peace sells, but who's buying? Peace sells, but who's buying? I automatically went for the Michael Anthony, higher, the Van Halen harmony, as I call it, So those were always just natural for me, because, I was always one of the singers in my bands growing up. And then at some point, we kind of started to have a dedicated lead singer. So I was always doing the background stuff. And again, I love the Van Halen harmonies, super lush, really filled out, nice and clean. That's my voice, is that real clean thing. Same with Boston. These are things that I grew up with, eventually some early Aerosmith, stuff like that, things that were 2-part harmonies. So, fast forward here, now we're in the studio, and I'm singing Walk With Me Forever in the key of C. So perfect for me. And that's why I finally found a song that I could sing really well. And even Heavy as the Crown is dropped. It's C with a drop, right? So it's
like a B flat.
Down to the B flat, exactly, to a B flat. So that's even lower. In fact, live, I find that it's at the bottom of my range. I mean, how does it feel to be? I mean, I got to be careful how much pressure I put on my voice to not roach my throat from singing too powerfully, too low. Right. So I've just, there's some new things I'm learning about my voice live. Walk With Me Forever is perfectly fine. But so as we're going to the lyric of this, with Walk With Me Forever, it's kind of singing it true to how Guillermo wrote it, right? It's all the way on my path. I feel that I can't leave this hole. What is the hole? Well, it's kind of this depressive hole that I'm in, right? And as the wind blows, so picture walking down the street as the wind blows, not hard in Europe because it was cold. I guess this wasn't too bad. We've been over here. It seems like we've been over here a lot recording and shooting videos. It's freaking cold and bundled up. So as the wind blows, every time I go and walk alone. So that's a pretty easy visual. So, in my mind, as I'm singing these lines, I'm trying to get a visual, right? Now that you're so far away because you're deceased, right? You're in the ethers, the netherworld. There's nothing I can do to change that, right? So I'm just trying to narrate this, this story, right? So I think what hit me in the chorus is that it's a 2-part chorus. If I stay here on my own, here on the earth, right? Because you're gone, but I'm alive. So if I stay on my own, will you walk with me forever, right? Sort of you're calling to the afterlife. Would you walk with me forever? I'm lonely. I'm scared, sad you're not here, and if I wander all alone, in other words, I'm not with you anymore. You're not with me anymore. I'm still with you. Right. So if I stay on my own, you walk with me forever. If I wander all alone now during this lifetime, I'm still with you. My thoughts are still with you. And then as I was singing this, and I think this is what I played into on the video treatment, is then the second half of the chorus is an answer to that, right? So now it's the deceased. Okay, so now it's the deceased talking to the survivor. Said, okay, well, if I stay here on my own in eternity, right, then you come and walk with me forever. Now I'm no longer all alone because you're with me. Right. And I that became so clear to me as I sang that it's the survivor talking to the deceased. And ultimately the deceased answers back and says, hey, you're coming with me eventually because no one lives forever. And eventually you will join me in the afterlife. And that sort of to me tied the whole idea together of this very haunting, melancholic thought of the lyrics. So, and I think it kind of came to me in the vocal booth. I was singing it, and that, sort of helped me as I was singing it, as we were developing the melody. Christian Cole, helped us develop this melody, and we did an interesting thing. We did
Love that guy.
the Desmond Child half step thing, right? Mm-hmm. And Mutt Lange does a lot of this on the Def Leppard records. Mm-hmm. And, where, again, I know you can't hear me here, but where there's just these half step modulations, right, to the pre-chorus, and then up to, so you're in C, and then it's this sort of half step, and then we half step up one more time to land on D for the chorus, right? So these half step modulations, Bryan Adams does this a lot. That really sets up, half step makes this really nice lift to the vocal melody. It's a key change. It literally changes the key within the song, and it really opens up a feeling, right? All of a sudden, it goes from this kind of dark, sadness in the verse, which is in C, but by the time we mod it up, a half step and then a half step to this chorus, it just opens up this big, beautiful, nice, chorus. So that's the half step modulation thing that we brought in to that.
So you did the work in getting from what he wrote to you just not just singing the words that he wrote to have something mm-hmm. to sing, like a lot of people could do just whatever. You went all the way into what was written to really understand it and to get down what needed to be there to maintain that and enhance it instead of, just singing whatever was on the page.
Well, look, let's go back to a time before. So let's use Megadeth, for example, right? So, in that band, I was not the singer. So when I would write lyrics, I would write a story. And as much as I liked it, I had to go, okay, is Dave going to sing this? Is this something, he's going to believably sing from the stage? Because ultimately, as the singer, you're selling the song, right? One part of it is writing the song. The other part of it is selling it. So is this something that's going to be that? Metal Allegiance, same thing. I would write, me and Alex Skolnick, Mike Portnoy, Mark Mengia, we would write lyrics and go, okay, Floor Jensen from Nightwish is going to sing this. Alyssa White is going to sing this from Arch Enemy. Mark Alcegeda, Randy Blythe, so we're writing these lyrics, the four of us are composing, knowing someone else is going to be the singer, right? So I've had quite a bit of experience doing this in other settings. So, you write something and you go, okay, can we work towards, and how committed to it are you? And I think Guilherme was malleable with this is the feeling, this is the sentiment, this is what I wrote it about. So it was sort of my obligation as the singer to not distort and twist that, because it was his concept that he brought in. But as we then started co-creating on it, and we started collaborating and co-writing it, you know, I always check with the person who brought the song in the door, you know, and if it's me, then I've had other singers do. Jeff Scott Soto, for instance, he sang on, you know, for the Ellefson Soto record. Some of the initial stuff I had already written. Me and my guitar player Andy Martingelli had already written it. He said, "Hey, you know, here's a lyric idea we have. Here's kind of a sketch of a melody that we've lined out." And he was very respectful. It's like, "Do you want me to sing it just like this? Do you want me to take a few liberties?" And I think our attitude always was, "Dude, you're Jeff Scott Soto, man. Freaking, you do what an awesome singer like you does, right? Yeah, you do you, you know." And he loved it. He'd go, "Man," I don't think I haven't been part of a record like this in like forever, where everything I send back to you guys like it, you know." And you know, I felt like we were like Wayne and Garth, like, we're not worthy, you know. But it's like, dude, you know, we got a great bass player, we got a great guitar player, we just need an awesome singer. That's you know. So just everybody do what they do. And I think there's, you know, again, songs and collaborative settings come in all different shapes and sizes, but I always prefer the ones that, at least I think I walk out of the ones most satisfied, where it's like, you know, I got to put a little of my stank on it, you know. I got to put a little of my voice, my sound, my whatever, you know, on that performance. And there's been many others where it's like, "Hey man, just play it like this," and, you know, and you're kind of just sort of reciting the part the way the maestro wants it done. And that's part of the business too. You know, sometimes people hire you to say, "Hey man, you're great, but I want it done my way," you know, and so you get all kinds of different things. And so I think when you walk into any different setting, you know, sort of read the room, like who's in charge, how we roll. You know, when I worked with Max Cavalera on the Soulfly records, you know, I'd come up with a part and I say, "What do you think?" He goes, "Man, you're David Ellefson. Do whatever you want, man." I said, "All right. I mean, a little more of this, a little more of that." He goes, "Whatever you want, man. You're David Ellefson. Do what you want, man." You know, and even the guitar player, Mark Rizzo, he looked at me, he goes, "Dude, this is like the most casual metal gig ever. Like, it really is." And it really was, man. It was so fun. And I just, again, play Max's songs because they're his songs, but to just, you know, be able to put my own parts in, write my own cool melodies. And that was one where it was nice to hear the demo. He'd write at home, he'd putting in these little literally little 4-track kind of Tascam videos or recordings, and he had demos, and they were great, man. I mean, they literally sounded like the song was going to sound once we recorded it on the big desk and, you know, on a multi-track recording. And but to know where the verses were, to know that kind of stuff was nice, because then I could sometimes play around and add licks and do stuff like that. So this stuff all comes in a lot of different sizes and shapes and personalities.
So there's it's just 3 dudes in the band, right? In DIETH. Yep. And I think that's a cool number for a collab basis, because, you know, the drummer will always put stuff in depending on how musical the drummer they are, right? Have some input into the
right
how it's going to go. But if it's 2 people writing the music and vocals part, that's like a, you know, kind of it's easier to have a partnership, you know, than 5 or 6 or 7 like people trying to like throw their everything in. And then it sounds like because you are able to because you're both open to the collab, you've got a lot of buy-in, and it's not just a gig. You're not just David fucking Ellefson. You could do whatever you want. You're
right.
You're the band, and it sounds like that's working out pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, when, you know, Guillerme's songs, you know, look, with Megadeth, I mean, we could finish each other's sentences because we've done it so long, you know. I mean, the Dystopia record, I literally sat down and recorded all the bass to a click track. There was no drums, there was no nothing. It was just me working with Dave, literally playing bass parts to a click track, right? That was how the album, And so, you know, and again, was a long time musical partnership, so we knew sort of where the commas and periods and exclamation points went in the musical sentences, if you will, right? So new musical collaboration with Guilherme, and he brings in stuff that, I get it because it's heavy. I understand some of the transitions, but like even in the Hall of Hanging Serpent, like Guilherme will literally change keys right in the middle of the song. Like kind of like we talked about with Walk With Me Forever, but he'll do it, with Hall of the Hanging Serpent, the verse, right? Then all of a sudden run into like this F sharp. No. It's like, where did that come from? Like that's like a whole other thought, right? He just shifts thoughts, and it's like, but yet it's great. And then where it resolves on this B flat, well, then that B flat begins the first note of the verse riff again. Right? So it's like he knows what he's doing, right? And it makes sense. It's just it's like I walked into a room with a whole other conversation than what I've been doing for the last 40 years, and it was really welcome. It was really fresh. It was unusual. And I think that's the thing that, they needed, obviously, another member of the group to come in and kind of get a quick read and a quick study. And look, I've made a lot of records with a lot of great producers. I got to say, producers have been my best band teachers ever. I have learned more from making records, producers challenging me to do things different, challenge me to play different parts. Even I work with my friend John Ecolino, who has the Focusrite Room and Platinum Underground out in Phoenix, right where I live. And I always say to him, John, produce me. Here's the song. Here's my chart. I've worked up the tune. But give me your eyes and ears, and he's a guitar player. He's from the group Icon. So he's got great musical sensibility. He's a great guitar player. And usually what he tells me is, hey, stop playing guitar, play bass, stop playing so many notes, because my tendency, and it's probably, I go back, I listen to Killing Is My Business, and we're all just showing off. Everybody back in that day, we're all trying to outplay and show everybody that we're awesome. And it's the old, if I knew then what I knew now, I wouldn't have played so much. I would have played it simpler. And that just comes with musical maturity. And I think, it wasn't until probably the 90s when I realized, like we were working on the Cryptic Writings record. Song She-Wolf's a perfect example, where the guitar, this pattern, right? And normally, probably prior to that, I would have played that pattern, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, when I was cutting the bass on that, because I think, the best I recall, we cut drums, then guitars, then bass, I think. And I think that's how we did it. And I realized how big we could get the bass, but I realized, just hit eighth notes, right? Just lock in with the drums. And I realized it sounds like I'm playing the pattern, right? Because with a bass guitar, every time you hit the note, it takes time for the note to develop, right? And unfold. That's, you go to concerts and you see the big subwoofers. There's a reason it takes a lot of time for these notes to sort of, develop because of the length of the frequency, right? So every time you hit a bass string, you're essentially cutting off that note that you just started, which would be nice to have it develop. So even with, I'll use another one. Mark of Cain is a song on this record that's super blistering fast. Mm-hmm. It's just out of control, right? But it's funny that the bass line under it is this halftime march. It's almost like a Paul, right? Under this right? The drums and guitars are just flying. But underneath of it, I had to go back and relearn the bass part because I forgot what I played on it when we were in it, because we wrote it in the studio, wrote the bass line. And it was kind of like the John Aquilino thing. He's like, dude, stop playing guitar, play bass. You know, somebody's got to be in the slow lane holding this together here, because everybody else is in the fast lane and it's ready to fall off the rail at any given moment. That's why we like it. It's so freaking blistering, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm the one, you know, holding down.
You're Spider-Man holding the bus that's would be falling off the edge of the, of the bridge. You're the
holding
it down,
skidding off the rails,
and
I'm like,
it's still going, but
yeah.
You're keeping it from going into the water.
It's interesting because even live when we play it, you know, I got to really kind of pull back, because the drums are, you know, bugga, 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 this thing, you know, and I'm just kind of back there, just kind of doing this, you know, this halftime internal metronome. Like I picture, I used to play in orchestra band and marching band, right? So it's like the guy with the sousaphone and the tuba, right?
Yeah.
You know, these. Ironically, I'm in Germany. These old kind of German pub tunes, you know, right? Meanwhile, everyone else is just, you know, thinking orchestra band. The piccolos and the flutes they're Yngwie, right? They're shredding, and you know, and I was tenor sax, so I was kind of in the middle. So sometimes I would shred. Usually, I was kind of had half shred. You know, kind of sitting next to the baritone, the alto, and then behind me was the brass, the trombones, and the baritones, and eventually the tubas. You know, and the bigger and longer the instrument, and the longer the horn and the bell of the instrument, you know, usually the less notes you played, because it just took longer for the air to move out. So it's just kind of these simple physics. So that's, you know, there's another compositional thing, you know, of fitting parts together, you know, even in a DIETH death metal band.
Yeah. So, you said that you were like kind of coming up with that part in the studio as you're recording it, but as you guys are writing these songs, the initial parts of them, you're coming up with these ideas. Like you said, you've got your riff ideas you're recording on your phone, you're sending them out, and they're getting worked on. Are you ever putting together like demo versions in your recording software or anything, or is it mostly that you're sending out these ideas and somebody else is sort of arranging them, or how does it get from that initial idea to a complete thought before you hit the studio?
Good question. So, you know, it's funny. When we got signed to Capitol Records with our Pete Sells money, we bought a Tascam. It was a 6 input, but it's 4 tracks, right? Mm-hmm. And none of us used it. Finally, by like the early 90s, like 1990, right? So about 4 years later, I'm sitting at my house and I'm starting to make demos, right? And I'm doing the Beatles thing where you bounce it all over and then you bounce it all back to 2, so you get 2 more tracks. So I'm doing it. I'm really getting into it. And this time, Pro Tools, I just bought my first Macintosh. Pro Tools was just really a 2-track editor at that point. It was not yet the TDM multi-track thing that we know of today. So, and there were some other software things, but we were still mostly working with tape, right? And you know, I was into it. I enjoyed the analog science. You know, as the kid growing up in Minnesota in my bands, I was always the guy that owned the PA. I was always buying the equipment. So I understood crossovers and, you know, all the different frequencies and you know, sort of preamps and inputs and gain structure and stuff of a PA system. So I did a lot of this stuff into the early 90s. And then it seems like at some point, I just really lost interest in having a digital audio workstation, because you know what pissed me off about it is I'd get a musical idea, I'd be in a musical mindset, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, how do I get this freaking? Why isn't this thing coming in? I see the meter, but I don't hear it, you know. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, I just lost my musical idea, right? Yeah. So I realized for me, I'm not very good at doing both. And so if I'm going to create, just set the iPhone up, just record it, right? At least I've got the idea cataloged, right? And like I say, now with DIETH, we transfer the stuff over right away, right? Immediately. I just get it right over to the guys. So we've got it stored in some opposite, sides of the world. And we've got, album 2 folder that's got a lot of stuff in it. I'll do the same thing with lyrics. Especially when I'm traveling, when I'm flying, I'm moving. it seems like stimulation coming at me, whether it's driving or it's 600 miles an hour in an airplane or something. You know, I get this stimulation comes to me, and I'll get an idea and I'll write it. And even if it's just kind of a verse idea, or it's a bunch of stanzas, or I start to get some ideas, and I'll always put them into. I got lyric folders on my laptop here. I'll start sharing those with the guys. Say, hey, here's the new lyric that I just wrote. Sometimes I write it top to bottom, like Heavy as the Crown. Other times, same with Don't Get Maggot Even, was kind of a completed thought top to bottom that I wrote. Mm-hmm. And other times it's just a few stanzas, you know, of some things. And so I keep all of it. So when it comes time to go into putting the song together, like in the studio, I've got oftentimes extra lines, you know, and I'll even note it at the bottom of the document, extra lines, you know what I mean? So in case I got to pull some stuff up. But yeah, I don't sit at home and make these completed demos. I really don't. And I know I probably should, but I don't. And sometimes I'll go down to Aquilino's place and I'll just pick up a guitar and go, dude, just get me some tone, plug into a fractal, get a good tone. Let me just carve some riffs. I'm in a riff mode, you know what I mean? And I'll just riff out and I'll write 6, 7 things. Sometimes they fit together, and you know, other times they're just pieces. And I'll just say, look, just give me that. Let me take those home. And now at least I've got a bunch of ideas that I can start working on. And you know, you never know how you come up with, you know, look, Nick Menza, we're working on this movie, right? And one of the ideas I didn't realize how prolific he was after Megadeth. He had a ton of songs and things that were never completed or never came out. I said, pull up his drum track. So we pulled up some tracks, and I just started carving riffs over it. I said, I'm gonna write with Nick right now, right? Nick's posthumous, right? Mm-hmm. He and I are going to collaborate. We're going to write tunes. So we basically did a whole soundtrack with us collaborating with Nick over drum parts that he already wrote.
Wow.
And a bunch of us writing stuff. So there's another whole concept of writing is just give us some Nick Menza, man. Throw it up and let's throw it down. And so writing entire songs over his drum tracks that he had that no one ever did anything with, and they never saw the light of day. So we didn't necessarily have to even take the entire song. You could say, dude, let's take that. That's a great section. Let's write a verse right there. Let's take this other piece. We'll write a chorus. You know, you could almost chop it up and carve it up and create new song ideas with it. But it's really Nick. It's really his performances, and you're collaborating with brother Nick.
So once you send these ideas out, is it Guilherme that's putting them sort of into a song format? Like, does he take what you've got, and do you then hear a more fleshed out version of it before you actually wind up in the studio, or are you working on it together?
That's what I say. I call him sort of the master composer. You know what I mean? It's sort of like we need a headquarters to send it to. Get it over to G-Man, as I call him. Right? Let's get it over to him. He can sort of interpret it, make sense of it. And I think that concept works well because at least we have a sort of a think tank. We got a central brain, to sort of pull it all together. Because again, he kind of defined the sound of the band, I think, from the beginning. So I think that's a good place to keep it. And I don't mind if he takes stuff that I write and tweaks with it and moves it around and even again, sometimes I'll write. Now I kind of try to intentionally write things in the key of C because I know that's where it's going to ultimately end up with DIETH. I mean, in the beginning I was taking things in all kinds of different keys and sending it over, just so that I would, so that I just kind of have it over there for him,
Yeah. So then you're working with, you said you're working with Christian Cola. Was he just the engineer, or was he or anyone else doing any kind of like producing sort of, like giving some opinions or feedback or tweaking the songs or any of that sort of thing? Or is it just mainly the three of you?
I'm gonna stand up here for a minute.
Oh yeah, sure.
I'm sitting down talking so much. No, he for sure did a lot of he did a lot of especially on Walk With Me Forever. He really helped flesh out the the vocal melody, and I think even a little bit of the wording excuse me, for the chorus, because we kept the storyline intact, but he's a very musical guy, right? So he writes with guitar, and that really helps. When a guy can sit down, I guess with keyboards or whatever, but in particular in our case, in this, working with, guitars, he would pick up his guitar and he would start chugging away, and he's a great player. And I think it really helped with that song in particular. For the most part, we recorded a handful of bass things there with him. He's got 3 different rooms there. So he's got his main room. He's got a second room that he was always having another engineer do a lot of editing with. And then there was kind of a little C studio, if you will, Studio C. And me and Guilherme spent a lot of time in there working on stuff almost autonomously from what was happening in the other studio. Guilherme did a lot of, and he works on Logic. So Guilherme did a lot of producing himself on this record. He cut most all of his guitars over in Portugal. Michal took all of his drum ideas back to his place in Poland, in Gdansk, where he has a great drum room. Okay. He cut all of his drums there. So our time with Christian was, it was sort of a communal moment for us to come together. And I think probably I was the one who probably benefited the most from it. We recorded some bass there. Like I said, we did Mark of Cain, Free Us All. We put Don't Get Mad, Get Even together as a song. When I came in, I said, man, why don't I had this idea with that about writing it as a sports theme, like a UFC, NHL, hockey, kind of thing, right? Where, don't get mad, get even, kind of, we will rock you, but something, when you go to hockey games, different sports are kind of tuned into different music cultures, right? And hockey for sure is a, hard rock, heavy metal. You hear a lot of Metallica and Pantera and this kind of stuff. So I thought, let's just kind of create that sort of anthem arena rock chant, So that was where we started. We had the tune, and then we together created, we created this intro, the don't get down, get even, don't get mad, sort of this battle cry, a call to action, if you will. And so that we did that at Christian's place. Again, it was fun for me to work with Christian, just recording bass, just to get different ideas, again, I don't walk in so much going, even if I have the part that I want to play, to be able to go in and just say, hey, give me some suggestions here. What do you think? Because again, producers are incredible. They've been the best bass teachers I've ever had, because, I don't want to just sit in a bedroom and learn how to shred. I want to make records, I want to make recordings that hopefully outlive me. You know what I mean? So what is it about those performances that are so magical? Even at the end of Mark of Cain, when we went to that boom, we hit this halftime thing, right? With these big, long, glissando bass slides. Boo, ba, 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 right? This halftime thing. A lot of that was Christian, saying, why don't we, break this up here? And, I played and came up with the parts, but he had a lot of good direction on how to sort of compose the part, and that to me is what a great producer does, is they come in and they help, with the, produce this, pull it together, let's pull this whole idea together so that it's a thought, that the whole thing is a completed thought.
Another thing that I've found is really helpful in tracking with someone like that is that they set it up so that while you're performing, it sounds really great so that it's closer to what the final thing will sound like, and it's really inspiring. Whereas if you're at home, you know, in your bedroom, in your maybe your home studio even, that might be okay. Like, I'm not much of an engineer, so if somebody else is tracking whatever, especially vocals, I find, like, if it's not like compressed enough and like sounds really good in your ears, you're not going to sing right. And it's the same. Yeah. So working with somebody like that, especially Cola's got the sauce, you know, you've probably got to feel it a lot better.
And I look, I give him credit for getting me in the right, you know, getting this sort of whiskey smokiness of my voice for Walk With Me Forever. You know, he helped me, you know, it took a minute, right? It was like, okay, I'm in this dark, I mean, our vocal booth was just this little, it was basically a room between two rooms, right? That's all it was, right? A vocal mic, trying to get a mic stand in there, headphones, and, you know, I mean, it was literally like this little area, right? Yeah, pretty much, right? And people could walk from the kitchen behind me over to the Studio C, right? I mean, it was literally this, and, you know, it was great because Guilherme he's got a really good concoction here with, and I carry it with me with ginger, like raw ginger, lemon.
Oh, yeah.
And some hot water and honey, ginger, lemon, and boy, I tell you what, that stuff, that'll knock anything out of you. I mean, you can be dying and that'll kill anything inside of you. So it was really good for the voice, you know. So we'd sit around and teetotalers, right? We'd be sipping this little concoction, but really helped my voice. But, you know, as we're working on the song, you know, just getting in the mood, right? And he's like, "Nah, give it a little more. Make it sound like you just smoked a pack of cigarettes, you know." So he's like, "All right, on my way, on my back. Okay, no, too much. Pull it back a little bit. Okay, you know, kind of find it, right?" And it's like, that's perfect right there. That's it. That's the tone we need, right? And once I settled into it, it's like you could get there. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I get the character, because, you know, you really, when you're singing, you're character acting, right? Mm-hmm. You're, you know, that's why I love these actors who do these animated, like Pixar, right? You know, you see Jason Alexander and Ellen DeGeneres and these famous actors, you know, and they're in there doing these silly cartoon things. It's very creative, you know, to create these characters, and that's really what you're doing when you're singing and when you're quote unquote cutting a vocal. You know, it's you're in this case doubling, you know. Then I did all my own harmonies and did all my own harmony stuff as well. So, you know, really, you know, took the time to create it. And, you know, my voice would last for a while, and it's like, okay, I can hear I'm getting a little fatigued. Let me stop right now, you know, and then I'll come back to it. I just need, you know, give me a half hour to just kind of let my voice recover a little bit, and then come back so that the voice, you know, that the vocal take is consistent throughout, that it's not getting, you know, fatigued, so you can hear it, from one take mm-hmm. to another. So there's a lot of little tricks when you're cutting a vocal, because, you know, you're really at the mercy of how your voice feels at that moment and on that day when you're recording.
Yeah, that's it's the eternal struggle that you can always put new strings on your guitar or bass, but your voice is you got to catch it at the right time sometimes. I was thinking about something that you said a little bit ago about if you knew then what you know now. So do you have any sort of advice or tips or even any just kind of perspective, having played music for so long and been writing for so long, about for people who are maybe starting out or have been doing it for a little while, just anything about songwriting that's hit you really hard over the many years that you think is worth sharing? Something that maybe you would say to your younger self starting out writing stuff.
Well, you know, like I said, you know, the 80s was shreddom, right? It's like how many notes, and, you know, I focused so much on the left hand and all of this stuff. And it wasn't until I got in the studio, I'll sit down here. It wasn't until I got into the studio and started cutting tracks that, you know, the producer would say, all right, like, can you just play eighth notes? Can you just play, you know, just do this, da, 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 da. You know what I mean? Can you just do that? Because if you can do that to a click, we can keep you. If you can't, we're going to have to get someone else to play it. So I learned really quick, get rid of all this crap. Just da, 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 you know, just play bass. So I think, you know, a lot of that, I think, was probably in sort of the performance stuff, you know? And then, so when it comes to writing a song, you know, I think it's always about, what are you trying to say? You know, it's always these questions to ask yourself. What's the song about? You know, try to answer it in one sentence. Oh, it's about this guy meets this girl, you know, they fall in love. She breaks his heart, and, you know, he's sad, right? Whatever it is, right? Or heavy is the crown. Hey, you know, heavy is the current, you know, head that wears the crown, right? You know, whatever it is, maybe it's and in that case, it's sort of a sort of an adage, if you will, right? So, you know to yourself, what is my song about? Who am I writing it to? And I think probably the third thing is do I like it? You know, I think if you try to write a song for somebody else, that's a really slippery slope, because how do you ever be satisfied with that, you know? And I think even if you're, you know, in Nashville, for instance, you know, there's, you know, it's a town built on songs, right? People are always in the studio writing, you know, writers are put together for 3-hour sessions, you know, to write a song. And, you know, I like to always have a plethora of material around. You know, I like to always walk into a writing session with some material. Like I said, my folder of riffs I sent, my folder of lyrics I sent. And even if we don't use them literally or use any of them, to me, it's sort of the introduction, you know, and then sit down and sometimes, hey, let's put that folder aside. It doesn't matter. Let's just, I love that part you're playing here. Play that one more time. I got something right here I think that might come along with that, you know, and all of a sudden you're collaborating and the ideas develop like that. So I think when I go into writing sessions, I like to be a little bit prepared. And then ultimately, I think the song finds itself, you know, and you're really there to just be a channel to let the music flow through you. You know, you really aren't writing the song. You know, the song is out here. It's energy, it's spirit, right? Writing is a spiritual thing. So all you're really doing is being a channel. Probably the greatest thing, say a prayer, you know, right? Whoever, God, just let it flow through me. You know what I mean? I think that's always the prayer I say. Whatever that is, you answer to, you know, just let it flow through me, you know, and I'm just a channel. Let it come through me, because I'm just the sort of the conduit by which the message flows from me out to the audience, you know. So I think that kind of gets me out of the way of the song, you know, and just lets, you know, I've been trained, I'm skilled, I've practiced, I've done the homework, and all my skills on the instrument or singing or whatever, all that really does is it just allows the song to flow through me. And so I think ultimately that's really what we are as songwriters, is we're just a conduit to let the spirit flow through us.
That's a hell of a quote. I'm clipping that one. And I think
use it as you want.
Awesome. I think that's a great place to wrap it up, because that just sums it all up in such a nice, neat little put a bow on it, you know?
I love it.
Well,
that's cool.
And that's great advice, I think, really getting yourself out of the way of the song and being a conduit for what's coming and not getting in the way of it. That's really hard to do. It's really important. I always try and keep it in mind, but oh man, it's putting it into practice. It is practice. But Hey, so I really appreciate you taking the time today to come and talk to us, to talk to my audience, and all that. And congratulations on the album. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up for the band?
Sure. Yeah. Look, we have a summer ahead of us here. I know we're about a month into it. We, launched the band, but the album just came out. Like I said, we did all these different shows to kind of throw the band to the wolves and see if we survive. And I'd say we not only survive, we thrive, which is good. The road is where bands grow. It's where you really find out what you're made of. We're excited already about album number 2, but we're letting this process of the road, galvanize us and reveal more, because, again, just let more be revealed of who this band is. So the more time we spend together, the better we get, the closer we get, the more vulnerable we can get with each other, which helps us always write a better song. So a bunch of shows and festivals coming up here now until early September. And then after that, we'll regroup to see what's the rest of the live shows and the touring goes. I think with us, this isn't a band that we just want to be down in the trenches grinding every pub and bar that has an outlet for us to play. I think we want to be a little more discerning about when and where we play so that the band presents well. And, I feel like To Hell and Back was a story. We were really pulled together, the universe, the good Lord, whatever, pulled 3 random dudes together from 3 different continents who had a similar story. I mean, I think that there's a lot for these purposes of what we're talking about today, writing a song. This album is a collection of 10 songs that tell a story. And none of us saw it coming. And it just landed in our laps. And so, to the story of To Hell and Back, and now telling that story so that other people can relate to that, that we don't want to burn ourselves out on the road in a way that we're just, we drag ourselves in the studio to write album number 2. I think it's important with this that we pace ourselves so that we're fresh, because this really is about writing stories. That, I think, is what this band is about, more than just kicking the shit out of ourselves on the road every day. So we're pacing ourselves, which I think is it's a healthy, mature place to be in our lives right now.
Great. Well, I'll be looking forward to more of that, and hopefully all the people out there listening and watching will go and check out the band, your various music videos, follow on social media, listen on all the streaming platforms, all of that stuff. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you on behalf of all of our listeners. And enjoy the rest of your time in Europe, and hopefully talk to you real soon.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
All right,
See
David.
you, Trey.
Bye.
Bye.
You can stream the final edited audio podcast episodes on Spotify or anywhere that you check out your podcasts, your favorite podcast dealer, whoever that might be, iTunes, Apple Music. As I mentioned before, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by my songwriting course, Complete Rock and Metal Songwriting. You can find a link to that in the description below or at howsongsaremade.com. I stream these live on Mondays, and then the final episodes are, as I mentioned, on the How Songs Are Made podcast channel. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you real soon.